Worms 3D is one of my favourite games of all time, but admittedly it's a bit of an awkward game to be obsessed with. The game is nearly 20 years old at this point, and the 3D Worms formula hasn't been touched in over 10. It's also a bit of a difficult game to recommend to people because, for some reason, unlike most of the Worms series, the game was never digitally re-released. I know a lot of people will point to Worms Ultimate Mayhem here, but Worms Ultimate Mayhem is not a remake of Worms 3D. It's a remaster of Worms 4 that just happens to feature a good chunk of Worms 3D's content. It's nice to have the Worms 3D campaign here, but there's still a lot of great content that's missing, and at the end of the day, this is a Worms 4 remaster. It still has Worms 4's physics and lineup of weapons, which, personally, I'm not a massive fan of compared to Worms 3D. Ultimate Mayhem is great in its own right, but it's just not Worms 3D. So chances are that if you're like me and you're just really into Worms 3D, sooner or later you're probably gonna go fucking crazy. You're gonna start optimizing the hell out of missions in the campaign for like no reason with stupid strategies. You're gonna try the unused missions just to feel something new. And maybe, just maybe, out of curiosity, you'll eventually take a look at the game's code. Maybe you'll start fiddling with numbers to create some sort of incredibly scuffed hard mode. And maybe you'll find something kind of interesting. And that's specifically what I found today that I want to talk about. Now, if you've ever played Worms 3D's campaign, at least in the original Worms 3D, you might be familiar with the game's trophy system. Depending on how fast you beat a mission in the game's campaign, you'll be rewarded either a gold, silver, or bronze trophy, and which one you get comes down entirely to how fast you beat the mission. Now, Worms 3D is not really a game you're supposed to rush, and as a result, most of the windows to get a gold trophy are pretty lenient. And that makes sense. Worms 3D isn't a very difficult game, and there's also the factor that the enemy worms could just like dick around and waste time during their turn, so it wouldn't really be fair to have super strict windows to get a gold trophy. Just as an example, here are the time windows to get a gold and silver trophy on the game's second mission, Great Britain. The game uses milliseconds to determine time here, so this effectively translates to 3 minutes and 4.5 minutes. Now, one thing I found kind of interesting is that a lot of the time, the window to get a silver trophy is barely bigger than the window to get a gold trophy. The game never actually conveys the times you need to get these trophies to you, so getting a silver trophy really is just like, oh, you were nearly there. You were so fucking close. It also doesn't help that silver trophies are kind of dog. There's a lot of content in this game locked behind getting a gold trophy on missions, but silver trophies literally get you nothing. There are a few unlockables locked behind bronze trophies too, but absolutely nothing for silver. Where things get interesting though is the bronze trophy. The intention here is that if you fail to get a gold or a silver trophy, you'll always get a bronze trophy, and if you've ever played Worms 3D, that's what it will feel like. But things aren't actually that simple. You see, rather than making it so that failing to get a silver trophy just automatically gets you a bronze one, the bronze trophy instead just has an absolutely fucking enormous time window to achieve it, of 999 minutes. Now, of course, this raises the question, what happens if somehow you were to take over 999 minutes to complete a mission in Worms 3D? Well, in that case, you'll unlock a fourth trophy, a clear one. Now, this graphic for the clear trophy is used in Worms 3D. You'll see it in the challenge mode if you fail to get a time that's in the top 3. So you could argue that this isn't actually a clear trophy and it's just like a lack of a trophy. I mean, if you do get a clear trophy, you do unlock the next mission in the campaign, but clearly there's no icon for it up here. And to that I would say, come on dude, just let me have this. Just let me have this, okay? I love talking about this shit. Now on its own, this information might not seem super interesting. Like, so what? Idling in a mission for over 16 hours gets you a thing that looks slightly different from the normal thing. Whatever. But there's actually a little bit more to it than you might expect. You see, most missions in Worms 3D feature a round timer, and when that timer hits 0, the mission automatically ends. Believe it or not, the devs never anticipated you taking over 16 hours to beat a mission, so the round timer never even comes close to that. So any mission in Worms 3D's campaign that features a round timer is automatically impossible to achieve a clear trophy on, and that's 25 out of the game's 35 missions. Also, in case you were curious, all 3 of the game's unused missions feature a round timer as well, so they're effectively out of the running if you wanted to count them. That leaves us with 10 missions in Worms 3D's campaign that don't feature a round timer, and lucky for us, they're actually quite an interesting bunch. So let's talk about how possible it is to achieve a clear trophy on all 10 of these missions. Out of these 10 missions, there are sort of 4 different categories of mission here. So first off, we've got 2 missions that unfortunately are outright impossible. Worm in the Beanstalk and Too Boldly Go feature no round timer, no enemy worms that could potentially fuck with you idling, but unfortunately have unique fuckery that makes idling for 999 minutes on them impossible. Worm in the Beanstalk is impossible because the mission automatically ends in failure after 3 turns. The point of the mission is to use the parachute to collect all 15 targets on the way down, and finish each turn with one of your 3 worms in this boat here. If either of those conditions aren't met, the mission ends in failure. Too Boldly Go is impossible because the water in the mission constantly rises, so the mission will automatically end in failure when your worm drowns or the water submerges this crate that you need to collect to finish the mission. On a lighter note though, next up we've got the single easiest clear trophy in the entire game. Worms 3D's campaign features a single mission with no round timer, no enemy worms, and no mysterious third thing to fuck you over. The single least dangerous mission in the entire game, ironically enough, is Grave Danger. There is absolutely nothing stopping you from just idling for 999 minutes and then completing the mission as usual. The objective of the mission is to collect grenades and use them to rob graves, so kinda makes sense that there's no enemy worms here. If I saw someone doing that, I would leave them the fuck alone as well, so yeah, that checks out. In the next category, we've got 3 missions that don't feature a round timer, but do feature enemy worms, which you might think kinda throws a wrench in all of this. Like, stalling for 999 minutes has gotta be pretty difficult if you've got enemy worms shooting at you the entire time. Lucky for us though, these 3 missions don't actually end if you kill all of the enemy worms on the field. And those missions are Apple Core Island, which only ends once you collect this crate up here, regardless of if the enemy have been killed or not. Shiver Me Timbers, which only ends once you've killed all of the enemy worms and have the captain safely back on this ship. You're supposed to rescue him by like building a bridge so he can get away from this shipwreck here, but you can literally just make this jump, so it's like, whatever. And lastly, you've got a quick fix, which only ends once you use landmines to fix the circuitry inside this monitor. Yeah, this game's pretty fucking wacky sometimes. All of these missions are an easy clear trophy, because you can just kill all of the enemy worms so they don't bother you, and then idle for 999 minutes before doing what you're actually supposed to do. Now, these last 4 missions are where things get a little bit tricky. Like the last 3, these are missions that feature no round timer, but do feature enemy worms, but the key difference here is that the mission ends once you kill all of them. Killing them is the objective. This means that to get a clear trophy, you would have to stall for 999 minutes while keeping at least 1 enemy worm alive, which sounds pretty difficult. Stalling for 999 minutes while an enemy is firing at you every other turn just doesn't seem feasible, but luckily for us, Worms 3D's AI is a little bit lacking in the eye department. If you manage to put an enemy worm in a scenario where they just can't figure out how to hit you without hurting themselves or moving out of the tiny area they're allowed to move within a specific mission, they'll conveniently realize violence isn't the answer and do nothing but continuously waste their turn over and over and over again. This is surprisingly easy to exploit in certain missions, and we will absolutely be making the most of it here. In my opinion, Crop Circle is one of the game's more difficult missions, but you can very easily force the AI to just skip their turn over and over by positioning both of your worms underneath the enemy worm's spaceship. If you do this, they'll just skip their turn over and over again. You can just wait here for 999 minutes and then do what you're actually supposed to do once the time is up. Tree Village Trouble is a little bit more complicated, but still relatively easy. Kill all of the enemy worms except for one of the 2 standing on either of these huts. Then just position both of your worms in that hut that the enemy worm is on, and they'll just waste their turn over and over again. Wait for 999 minutes, and then give them the business. Now, I was fully convinced that Helter Skelter would be impossible due to a number of factors. First of all, if you get up in the enemy's grill after killing all but one of them, they'll just attack you with a baseball bat, so that's off the table. Now, I figured hiding wouldn't work either because this mission features an NPC, and if the NPC dies, then you fail the mission. However, surprisingly, hiding actually is the answer because the enemy isn't remotely interested in this NPC and will never actually fire at them. The only way they take damage is by attempting to hit you and fumbling. Thanks to this, you can hide just outside of the enemy's line of fire and easily wait out the 999 minutes needed. Now, the last mission I want to talk about is High Stakes, which is actually extremely easy to get a clear trophy on, but it's got a lot of little quirks that make it very fun to talk about. High Stakes features only one enemy worm, and they never actually fight back. You can literally just wait at the start of the mission for 999 minutes, and then whenever you feel ready, go up to him and give him the business. The gimmick of this mission is that you can only actually kill him with a baseball bat. If you kill him any other way, he'll just respawn. This means you have to get up close to him, but the path to him is littered with triggers that will spawn undead zombie worms, and you have to kill all of them before the mission ends. Luckily, there's a path to reach this worm without triggering any of the undead worms, so you can just take that and chill next to him for 999 minutes if you feel like it. Tell you what, while you're waiting, here's a fun little glitch you can do on this mission. Go up here and collect this girder. Make your way up to Draculaworm, or whatever the fuck his name is, prod him out of the way, and position the girder where he was. Then kill him with anything other than the baseball bat to make him respawn, and when he does respawn, he'll clip through the floor and take full damage. So yeah, thought that was mildly interesting. I wouldn't recommend doing this if you're trying to stall for 999 minutes because getting the girder requires disturbing one of these undead worms, which is just a bit of a pain in the ass. One last interesting quirk of High Stakes is that out of the 7 missions where getting a clear trophy is possible, this is the only one where beating the mission with a bronze trophy actually unlocks something. This means that, hypothetically, if for whatever reason you wanted to beat Worms 3D's campaign with the lowest possible completion percent, this is mandatory. You actually just have to sit your ass down and wait for nearly 17 hours for this mission to fucking happen. So yeah, have fun, one person who ever felt like trying that. So, there you have it. Now you know how to get a 4th semi-real, kind of fucked up and obscure trophy in 8 of Worms 3D's 35 missions. And that's something. If you wanted to try this for yourself, these 8 missions alone would take just under 8,000 minutes to complete, or just over 133 hours. Now, one last thing before we wrap things up. There are 2 missions in Worms 3D that, for some reason, don't abide by the 999 minute rule. Now, this doesn't really matter because both of these missions have round timers, so it's completely impossible, but for some reason, Trial of the Damned and Beautiful Balloon have a 9,999 minute window to get a bronze trophy instead of a 999 minute one. This means that, hypothetically, if these levels didn't have a round timer, you would have to play them for nearly a full fucking week each to get a clear trophy on both of them. Man, that sure sounds like fun, doesn't it? So yeah, that's everything I wanted to talk about. Did you know that even though the game says it does 100 damage, the Holy Hand Grenade's damage is actually capped at 80? It's pretty fucked up, isn't it?